Welcome to the first ever CCH Freedom Podcast. CCH Freedom stands for Citizens Council for Health Freedom, and our mission is to protect patient and doctor freedom. So we will be talking with interesting individuals within the scope of freedom and who are fighting for freedom on the ground and in the exam room and across the country. So our first guest today is Dr. Kirk Moore. Dr. Moore faced decades in federal prison for refusing to comply with COVID-19 mandates he believed violated medical ethics. He was accused of destroying COVID vaccines and issuing medical exemption cards, acts the government called fraud, but his supporters called defense of informed consent. All charges were dropped in July 2025 after a 2.5-year battle. His story is now a touch point in the fight for health freedom and the right to refuse government-mandated medical procedures. So, Dr. Moore, welcome to our first ever podcast.
Well, Twyla, I'm honored to be your first ever guest for exactly what we're all fighting for is our health freedom.
Well, I'm honored to have you. So I have a list of questions here that I think will be of interest to everyone. So let me just begin. So let's just start out with your career. What drew you into medicine initially and then into cosmetic surgery? And how did your rapid recovery technique emerge?
Oh boy. So I grew up in Italy and finished high school here in the US because I knew I wanted to go to college. I thought I wanted to be an international lawyer like my mom's brother. But in college, I kind of had this I don't know, epiphany that I liked medicine, I liked biology. And so I kind of decided to switch gears. I worked for a doctor, actually a plastic surgeon who was a friend of my dad's. And so I worked for him in the summer of 1982. So I got exposed to, plastic surgery at that time. And what really interested me was just the diversity of what it was that he was doing. So, one day he'd be doing a facelift, the next day, and then later on that afternoon would be doing kind of, some sort of ankle, reconstruction or ankle, saving procedure because he still did a lot of reconstructive surgery at that time too. So it was just really interesting to me, and then so I ended up going through that, ended up getting into medical school, and decided that that's what I wanted to do. When I went to medical school, I actually said, well, I'm really into sports, so let's do sports medicine. One of my ER rotations when I was a student in medical school was I was in trauma surgery, and there was a guy that had I was in Florida, so he was driving across the Everglades Parkway from
Yes.
southwest Florida across over to Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, and I think he hit the only tree that they have on the Everglades Parkway, doing whatever amount, speed limit, and he had among other things, dislocated his hip. And so these once he was cleared and was fine from a medical perspective, these four orthopedic residents came in and reduced his hip, put it back into place. And the way they did that was just kind of what I felt was really brutal. And so I was like, I don't know if I can do that. Plus, these guys look like that, when they weren't walking around the hospitals and taking care of patients, they spent the rest of their time in the gym. So I just kind of said that, yeah, that's not my lifestyle. So ended up going into plastics. And then, like you said, it kind of morphed into now I mainly do body surgery. I don't do the full breadth of plastic surgery. Because just got into, I developed a technique, which was a modification of some other people's techniques. So I'm not the pioneer in it. I think the pioneer for me was Dr. John Tebbets in Dallas. Um, but just rapid recovery, quick recovery. I don't use any narcotics, no pain pills. People are back to work. Actually, they go out and do things the same afternoon as their surgery, and go out and are able to go back to work the next day. So they do have some limitations, but short of that, they're back to normal activities.
Hmm,
So
that's great. So when you went into medicine, what was your thought about your relationship with a patient and how that would be? And then what have you seen with where the patient-doctor relationship has gone today?
Well, I was always taught, and I always felt that my patient and the only obligation that I had was to take care of the patient that's right there in front of me. I'm not taking care of their family. I'm not taking care of of their friends. I'm not taking care of their community. I'm just taking care of that patient. And so, that's the Hippocratic Oath, is to take care of the patient that you have there in front of you. And I just never thought that the government would interfere with that and get in the way of what was best for my patient. Since then, I truly don't believe there is even the whole concept of public health shouldn't even exist. If you're taking care of your own patient, then that is what's best for what's best for them, and in turn, what's best for the public.
So when you first realized that, going to a situation that got you into the trouble that you've been facing, right? When you first realized that the government was going to mandate the COVID shot, what went through your mind as a physician?
Well, one, I thought it was illegal. I didn't think that, they were, permitted to do that. I've said this, any number of times. The only law that was violated here were the HIPAA violation laws. The people were allowed to ask you what your medical condition is, and you were required to tell them what your medical condition is. That to me is a formal violation of any of the HIPAA rules and laws and regulations that are actually out there and that are on the books. There are no requirements for me to inject anybody with any product. There were never any laws that were passed. And therefore, to me, the concept is that the federal government was violating federal laws, and I was taking care of my patients to the best of my ability.
So how did you find the courage to stand up to the authoritarian system, knowing that you could lose your license, your livelihood, and your freedom? Or did you not think that was possible?
I didn't really think that was possible. I thought that I was just taking care of my patients to the best of my ability. I thought I was doing what was right. I wasn't keeping anybody from having any of the treatments that they wanted. I never had anybody that came to me and said they wanted the vaccine and I didn't give it to them. And I never kept anybody else from getting the vaccine. So I was just counseling people about the treatment. And it's actually, I didn't even have to. These people were coming to me exactly for the reasons that, for what it was that we were doing, which was treating the patient in front of me and not giving them the shot that they didn't want to have.
So given that you're a plastic surgeon, were these people coming because they were a patient of yours in that realm, or were they coming because you were a physician that they knew would not, would provide them an exemption, and so they were coming to you for that rather than for plastics?
Well, it started off just with friends and family and current patients of mine. And then as the word spread, it obviously kind of morphed into people coming to me just because we were, giving people saline shots and not requiring that they have the COVID vaccine. So it kind of, the answer to that is both.
And how do you think anybody got to know that you were doing the saline shots?
Word of mouth. That's all it was. We weren't advertising. I wasn't really telling anybody. It was, my friends and family would know about it and they would tell people, and then people that came into me as patients would know about it. And so then they would tell them and their friends. And, during COVID, so prior to the vaccine launch, even I had taken care of probably 800 to 1,000 people. So it didn't just start with the vaccine for me. I started treating people for COVID in 2020, because the first red flag to me that I tell everybody was the fact that there is no treatment. Or go home and until you're blue in the face, we don't need to see you. And that's just antithetical to anything I've ever been taught in medicine. I use the analogy all the time. I used to take care of a lot of breast, reconstruction patients and breast cancer patients. The analogy, the analogy to me was, hey, you feel a little lump in your breast. Well, just go home, and when it's, huge and it's eroding through your skin and it's, this big pus, open wound or pus laden open wound, then come back and see me. And that's not the way you take care of medicine. Anything that we do in medicine is you always take care of things. You treat them early. We have a lot more success by doing that. And so I just it didn't make any sense to me that all of a sudden, no, don't treat anybody. Don't give them, Advil, Motrin, Tylenol. Don't treat them for their symptoms. Don't give them any IV fluids. Don't help them with vitamins, whatever else that you would typically treat somebody with flu-like symptoms. And that, so that's the way I was doing it. So a lot of those patients that then in turn had come to me for those
Mhm.
treatments, then turned around and came to me, for, the issue with the vaccine. I, I never started off to do this. To me, I was just happy just to counsel people, don't get it. It's not going to help you. Just like I tell people with all vaccines, I'm against all vaccines, and I have been for years. But I was happy just to continue to tell people that. But when they started mandating it for people to go see their family in hospitals, for kids to go to school, for people to undergo medical procedures, for people to have transplants, for people to hold their job. I mean, I had people in the military. There's two military bases right here by me, and they were getting kicked out or they were threatened with their job and their livelihoods just because they, wouldn't get, a government mandated shot.
Mhm.
So I felt like I needed to intervene and do something.
So then were you one of the doctors who was doing ivermectin early and all of those kind of repurposed drugs?
Yeah, so I started treating people with hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. According to first person that I followed was Dr. Vladimir Zelenko out of upstate New
Sure.
York. And I just listened to what he had to say. He seemed so honest and sincere and just caring, compassionate. And look, I'm not a primary care doc, right? I'm a plastic surgeon. You mentioned this earlier. I have a lot of primary care experience. I was in the Navy. I moonlighted in hospitals as an ER doc all the way through my residency. So I was taking care of flus and colds and headaches and, heart attacks and strokes and all that stuff I did that for, boy, from 94 to 2001. So, 7, 8 years. I took care of a lot of primary care patients. So I didn't have any issues with it. I mean, I had to refresh myself, 20 years
Sure.
later, in terms of microbiology. And so that was, that was kind of what got me into all of this in the first place.
Well, let me just say from myself and from a lot of people who are listening to this, a big thank you for likely all the lives that you saved by doing early treatment, by not allowing them to get into the cytokine storm, from saving them from the cytokine storm. I know that, people were looking for people like you who would actually do something to help them. And for all the people that were around you that found you, I'm sure that they are just very grateful. Now, how did it happen though that somebody found out that you were giving saline shots? What, and then did you fully realize what the consequences might be if you were found out? I mean, did you have any sense of, I wonder if they could come and figure this out and come after me?
Um, well, I appreciate, you saying that and thank you. How did they find out about us? There was a lady, I guess, and I didn't know this at the time. I just found out about it through the court hearing. There was a lady, I guess, who was just so anti-vax that, she told everybody she would never get it, never get it. And, she'd quit her job or be fired or whatever first. And so then, one day she comes in to see me. She gets her, gets her COVID card and goes back to her HR department. And so then they in turn said, something's fishy here. And so they called the Utah Health
Oh,
Department. And then the Utah Health Department kind of opened an investigation by calling the FBI. And then the FBI had they had two people come in as a sting operation. They got a card also without a shot. So that was what happened. And then I'm sorry, Twyla, I don't remember your second question.
well, I was
Um,
just wondering if you had thought about the consequences and you
um,
had thought that this might happen and what you would do if how far did you think this through? Or were you
yeah.
dealing with
Um,
the issue at hand?
I thought it through. I just really, truly did not think that there was going to be any issue with it. I mean, again, the American Medical Association Code of Ethics, still published to this day, as far as I know, unless they've changed it, says that, doctors and their code of ethics is going to come into conflict with the law. And so you have two requirements. One is you need to try to see if you can kind of change the law so that it comes into compliance with you and your ethical boundaries and morals to take care of your patients. And then if it doesn't, then you as a physician need to abide by your ethical and moral, standards in taking care of your patient to the best of your ability and first do no harm. So I really did not believe that, there was anything that I was doing that was really wrong. And like I said earlier, there are no laws that I violated. Um, the prosecution tried to say that the CDC has, they called it in their indictment, the lawful governmental functions of the CDC. In our motion to dismiss that we had in October of last year, we challenged them on that. There are no lawful governmental functions of the CDC. The CDC is an advisory agency only. They don't have any lawful capabilities. They don't pass legislation. They don't make rules. They don't do statutes. They don't do anything. And that's in their charter. So I truly believe, and still to this day believe, that the mandates that they put out violated our laws. And if anybody violated rules and regulations in the law of our land, the federal government did itself.
What were the specific charges that they laid against you?
So there were three charges initially. One was fraud. The other one was conspiracy because there was more than one person. The third one was counterfeiting for filling out cards, for essentially filling out cards when you didn't vaccinate somebody. And then the fourth one that they added in January of this year, at least to me alone, was a charge of destruction of government property and tampering with evidence. One of my co-defendants, my office manager, decided to take a plea deal, and she told the government that I told her to get rid of all the vaccines after we were indicted. One, that's not true. Two, I never would have done that. I thought the vaccines had already been disposed of anyway. The last shipment of vaccines I think we took was sometime in September, and I think they expired no later than the end of that month. So
Mm.
regardless of anything, all of the vaccines were expired anyway. And if they had to be destroyed, they would have. That was actually part of part of this quote unquote mandate and part of the CDC instructions were when the vaccine is expired that I was required to dispose of them. So even if I had told her in January or February of 23, which would have been 5 months or 4 months after the last expiration date, I was required by law at that, or at least by their own mandates, to have destroyed them anyway. So, that was the fourth charge. And that actually added, because it's tampering with evidence, that's the one that added another 20 years potentially to my sentence.
I see. Haha. And okay, I'm just thinking about remember when the shot first came out and it had to be, I don't know how many degrees below zero. It's like basically had to be frozen. And if it wasn't frozen, then it would be disintegrate, or you couldn't use it. Whatever happened to all that had to be frozen business?
Well,
Right?
you're right. So the Pfizer vaccine initially had to be at that in the super frozen state, and so I think, and that's the reason why Pfizer was actually responsible for delivery of their own product to the practice itself, as opposed to Moderna and J&J, who hired it out, stored their product at a McKesson. At a McKesson depository, and then McKesson would make arrangements for delivery. All
Okay.
of them ultimately were delivered either through FedEx and UPS anyway. So I don't know how it really made any difference. And you're absolutely right to question all that, because all of a sudden, Pfizer's super frozen thing that needed to be at minus 80 degrees or whatever just kind of disappeared.
Didn't have to be.
Right, right. And I certainly didn't have a freezer in my office that kept the temperatures at minus 80. So,
I know. When that came out, I thought, well, how's exactly that going to work? Because nobody's got that kind of equipment, right?
right.
And then when you look at the discussions that you had with your patients in the exam room, and what you were required to do according to what the CDC and the HHS said that you were supposed to do, how did this fit within your thought of informed consent and choice? Um, did patients talk about that? Did you talk about that with patients? To what degree did you feel like you could give them an informed choice if you were going to give them the shot? And to what degree did you give them an informed choice when you gave them saline?
Well, so saline shots were only given to the kids in their with their parents' permission and in the presence of their parents. And then at that point, the saline shots were also given to the parents, just so the kids didn't see, a treatment on one side for the kid, and then even though they were getting a card with a, showing them to be vaccinated, and then their mom and dad or whatever were there not getting a shot. So that's the only time saline shots came. Informed consent is a baseline of my practice. Okay, I mean, I don't do anything without informed consent. I explain to them all the pros and cons, all the risks, all the benefits, what could happen, what couldn't happen, the percentage risks of this, the percentage risks of that. If we don't do this, then, this is what can happen to you. If we do this, this is what can happen to you, et cetera. And so it's an integral part of my practice, and it is, I think, for most surgeons. And to me, when I'm instructed to uh, inject a product into somebody's body, that to me, I need to know what it is that I'm injecting. And when I have a product and a material safety data sheet that shows up that says intentionally left blank on both sides on a big piece of paper, a small little piece of paper that's folded up 47 times, and then you open it out to this 24 by 32 piece of paper that says nothing on it except intentionally left blank. To me, that's impossible to give anybody informed consent. And I don't understand how any doctor, any nurse, any PA, nurse practitioner, anybody can give a shot to somebody without knowing what exactly is in the product. So that to me, was one of the harbingers of the reasons why I did what I did.
And when patients came to you and they wanted you to, I mean, what did they come to you asking? When people
They
came,
wanted they wanted a COVID shot, or sorry, they wanted a COVID card without getting the COVID shot, so that they could continue to participate in society. I mean, that's the global umbrella of what it was.
and when they're sitting in the exam room with you, are you the one giving it, or is your staff the one giving it?
No, I had a staff member that was hired individually just to do this.
And did you ever converse with any of these patients?
Well, a lot of them would ask me, hey, they would text me or call me. Like I said, I was treating people for COVID.
Right.
When we were shut down, people were knocking on my door, calling me, texting me, contacting me through, group messaging and everything else with neighborhood chats and those kinds of things. And so a lot of them already had my cell phone number or knew how to reach me. And so, they would just say, hey, I need a COVID shot. Where do I go? Or I heard that, you're giving out COVID cards without giving the shot. And how do I make that happen?
Hmm.
And so, they just kind of knew about it. I'd never had one patient call me that was actually looking for the COVID shot that we ever had to turn away. Nobody called me and said, hey, I saw your name on the Utah Department of Health as a COVID vaccine provider. When's the next appointment that I can come in? Never had that happen.
Never. Okay. Now that you see everything that has transpired after, I believe they have now said that only so that would be 81. So 81% of the public has gotten the shot, and we have seen some of the ramifications of the shot. And so we have heard some of the public, personal stories about what happened that seems to be related to the shot and all of this stuff that's happening. Do you feel vindicated in what you did?
Well, I was vindicated after the first month in January about what it was even before I started all this. In January of 2021, there were 700 deaths reported to VAERS just for the COVID shot and over 19,000 vaccine, adverse events. There's 1.7 million now and over almost 40,000 that have been reported. There's 4,000 articles that have been published on it. Life expectancy has diminished by 30%, or not 30%, by 30 years almost. A 30-year-old now is probably only going to live until 55 if they've had two shots. So I'm absolutely vindicated. I knew I was doing the right thing. And, when you look at everything that's happened right now, there's certainly no reason why this ever should have been done. Michael Yeadon calls it a bioweapon. I think he was one of the first ones out there, along with Vladimir Zelenko. And I remember thinking to myself, these guys better have security if that's what they're going to be calling this. And since then, knowing that it was a Department of Defense operation, knowing that it was deployed by our federal government, knowing all the evidence and all the stuff that I can get my hands on with what Sasha Latipova has put out, what Catherine Watt has put out, what all of these people are, have out there. And then you look at an organization like react19.org from Brianne Dressen and, Dr. Walskog, Joel Walskog, and everything with, I want to say they have 20,000 or more people alone just in their organization that have been severely vaccine injured. I talked to Brianne. She lives right down the street from us here. And it's a weekly event that one of the members of her organization commits suicide from just not either getting treatment or unable to kind of handle the downsides and the debilitating, effects of these vaccines. We're seeing people with turbo cancer. We're seeing there was just the 53-year-old guy in Norway who was the leader of the vaccine, pushed the vaccines for everybody. He just died, 53 years old, otherwise healthy guy, getting every shot that he could get. I don't understand how people are still getting these shots, but the flip side of this, Twyla, is the numbers are very low. I think it's 10 to 15% of people are getting the new shots and
Yeah.
new bonus, new ones that are out there. And I'll actually I'll debate. I can't really debate because I don't have the science or data to be able to do that. But I don't think that 81% of our country got these shots. I think there's a lot more people out there that did what I did. If you just look at that one nurse in Germany who did 8,600 patients and gave them saline shots, I guarantee you there's other people out there that did the same that just haven't, that haven't gotten caught or have been able to stay under the radar. So I would
Or
say there's a large percentage of people that got saline or didn't get any shots, got a card, bought them online, did whatever. And so I think the number is a lot lower. I hope that it is.
I hope it is as well. And it is possible that some people just gave other people saline shots and never told them. You never know because maybe they didn't want to even have to face, what you have had to face. Is there anything about the government's handling of COVID that you think that and vaccine policy that you think that the public doesn't know? Like you've learned
I
in
think the
this entire
majority of the
process?
public is still I think the majority of the public is still in the dark about what kind of operation this was. This was a government Department of Defense um, biowarfare operation. And they're the ones that paid for the scientific development of it. They're the ones that paid for the development of the product. And all they did was they turned around and gave it to the pharmaceutical companies for them to slap the label on it. This is my opinion, slap their label on it and then in turn get paid. So it was kind of a money laundering operation. And it was the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of our country right now with what it is that they did and history of the world with what it is that they did to us.
I have just a few more questions, but I want to go back to one of the things that you said. And you said that people who are 30 now who took the shot will likely be dead when they're 50. Is that
55
correct?
is the number.
55.
That was an
And
article that was published, yeah, few weeks ago actually that was reviewed and Nick Hulscher and Dr. Peter McCullough spoke about that.
and was it their research in
No,
that
it was I don't
article?
believe it was their research. They're the ones that just highlighted it, and that's what
Highlighted
I
it.
saw. It was a Substack article, I believe, that Nick Hulscher highlighted.
So for people who have taken two shots or more who are listening right now, what can you tell them that would give them hope that they're not going to die in 25 years earlier?
Good question, Twyla. I don't know. I do know that there are some protocols. Some people don't have any effects at all right now.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen some people that have, benefited from IVIG. I've seen some people that have benefited from kind of low voltage energy transmitters that you put on the body. Arc for Health is an example out of Great Britain. Some people benefited from nattokinase, but it has to be high dose nattokinase. I think an article was published a while back that 1,500 or 1,800 milligrams isn't going to do it, or international units, I think is what it is. I think
Mm,
it's more like 18,000,
mm.
and where you get some benefits of reversal of the spike protein that's in your body. Um, but the problem right now is that there's really no acknowledgement in large measure that this even happens,
Right.
and therefore getting funding to try to do the studies that we need to do to try to find treatment regimens and to try to, reverse some of the effects
Mm.
are just a kind of a one-off thing in a lot of clinics. So that's a great question, and I wish I had the answers to it.
Well, I would encourage listeners to do what Mary Talley Bowden, Dr. Mary Talley Bowden advises, which is to find out what your spike protein level is. And I know that she has said that, and I'm just pulling these out of my head here, but for the people who have never gotten the shot, their spike protein levels are really low. And for the people who have gotten the shot years later, they are still, some of them, lots of them, too many of them are still over 25,000. And I believe she said that LabCorp was the best place to get it, better than Quest. But you can get it either place, but I believe it's a more specific test. And then you can start to see, what might be the possibilities if you have a really high spike protein level. Okay, so now life after this. So when were you first taken to task by the FBI and company? And then how long has that lasted? And then I know it was President Trump, right, who got you exonerated. Is that correct?
Attorney
Oh,
General Bondi.
oh, Bondi. That's right. Bondi. Sorry. Yeah. So how long was that process?
2.5 years. So January of 23, January 11th, I had about 10 or 11 officers show up in my office. Not like guns drawn with their vests, exposed and kind of like a huge raid and everything else. They just came in, served a search warrant on my phone and my office manager's phone because that's kind of how we were communicating over all of this. Um, and then so that process kind of just went through, a lot of motions filed. I spent 12 days in jail because I didn't follow my pretrial release restrictions, and I challenged the government on their jurisdiction. They put me in jail, but they didn't put Carrie, my office manager, filed the same motion. We just changed the name on it, and she went home. So that'll give you just a differential in terms of how it was, what they thought. I'm the ringleader, so and I was a flight risk. So they, had to put me in jail. And then when they did let me out, I was on an ankle monitor and house arrest. So I could go to my office and work and go home. I had 2 hours a week to go shopping and get food for my family and myself. And that was it. Um, so then, so we just had a bunch of motions that were filed. They precluded me from using what's called a necessity defense, meaning that, I was giving people an option and what my option one was less deadly or, was a better option than what the other one was. So they said that I couldn't use that. I couldn't bring in patients that were vaccine injured. I couldn't bring in experts like, Dr. McCullough or Pierre Corey or Jim Thorpe or any of the people that I knew who could could confirm that, hey, this was a really bad product that's out on the market. And I couldn't talk about any of those kinds of things. And I couldn't bring in people that had been vaccine injured to kind of prove that, hey, what I did was the right thing.
Mhm.
Um, the day after Donald Trump was elected, I got arrested again for communicating with my co-defendants, telling them that we had a hearing the next day. And that was back regarding our motion to dismiss and the necessity hearing. So the day before that, I texted two of my co-defendants and said, hey, we have a hearing tomorrow. I know you've had problems communicating with your attorneys, didn't know if you knew about it, but make sure you and your attorneys are there. So then when Carrie turned me in and said that I threw away or told her to throw away the vaccines, they arrested me for, illegal communication with my co-defendants regarding my case.
Really? You can't talk to your co-defendants regarding your case? How could that be?
So yeah, well, two of them were my employees, so I had to talk to them. But I guess telling them that we had a hearing the next day was against the regulations about the case. So
I
in
see.
in by a strict definition of this was about the case. Again, two of us got arrested. Chris went home, and I was in jail for 22 days. So again, just a differential in terms of who they're going after. Um, In January of 25, they, as we briefly talked about earlier, they had a superseding indictment. They had to take some of the evidence out because one of the people that had come in as an undercover agent and gotten a card without a shot ended up getting arrested for selling drugs. He
Oh,
was he was confiscating drugs from one guy and then turning around and hiding them, and then through a third party was selling them to make money. So
wow.
any of the evidence, so now he's, the evidence that he had was no longer viable. So they had to redo that, and then that's when they added the charge of, destruction of government property and witness or evidence tampering.
So,
So
so what was your feeling before Bondi? No, so Bondi pardoned you when?
July 12th at 8:30 in the morning.
And did you know it was coming?
No, no clue.
And do you know how it happened?
Well, my understanding is I met with her, 4 days later. Um, so in my discussion with her, with all of the publicity and everything that happened the week of my trial and everything that was going on, Marjorie Taylor Greene sent her a letter, had multiple phone calls, a lot of social media posts that she ended up seeing. She says that she didn't know about my case, in spite of the fact that we had run it through the weaponization work group, which was one of her committees that she had set up when she was first sworn in. But she said she didn't know about it. I'll take her at her word. And then with all the publicity and Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of just really raising that flag and really pounding the pavement about it and kind of all that. And then Mike Lee and Thomas Massey doing the same. It kind of got to her attention, and she just kind of said, "Oh, look, this isn't right." And her ex post, she said, "It ends now." Those are my three favorite words. It ends now. So
Yeah, and how many more people are there like you who are out there that nobody knows about that they're
I
going?
hope I hope there's a whole lot. I know there are. Tucker Carlson and Ed Dowd did a Fox Nation show, I believe, in either sometime in 2022 when he was still with Fox News. I'd
Hmm.
have to look back on that date, but I believe it was still 2022. And they talked about it towards the end of his podcast that he did, where Ed Dowd said that he was able to kind of get a card without a shot. And Tucker Carlson said, "Oh, I hope there's a lot more docs out there doing what your doctor friend did." So and I'm
But
standing in the back row going, "Hey, I'm over here. I'm over here."
my question is, who else is sitting in jail or has an ankle bracelet or, is facing charges that nobody knows about?
Oh my
That whose
gosh.
case is silent, who nobody has told Bondi or nobody has told anybody, nobody has any connections to tell anybody, right?
Right.
Who, how many cases are there? Maybe there aren't any, but maybe
Well,
there
yeah,
are
I
some.
don't know of any cases like mine, okay, that are still out there, but I do know of a lot of cases that either have been adjudicated already. There's a couple of nurses, a nurse practitioner, I think in New York, and another nurse in New York that actually made money on this, so they got in trouble because they were charging people for it. There's two people, one in New York and one in Utah, which were collaborating together, and that was actually a case that was prosecuted by the same prosecutor that prosecuted my case. And I mean, and get this, they made $1.4 million. They sold 140,000 COVID cards on eBay that they just went down to like Kinko's and got them printed, if there's even still Kinko's out there.
Mhm.
But they just went out and got them printed, and they were selling them online for $10 a piece. They got a year in jail and a $40,000 fine. So these people who made $1.4 million, take a plea bargain for a year in jail, and they want to put me in jail for up to 35 years for having saved people's lives and not making any money. I didn't charge anybody anything. Nobody had any bills out there. I didn't make, as a matter of fact, it cost me money. I'm paying employees to kind of, manage this without getting any reimbursement on it.
So
And
what is your message to other doctors who are afraid to speak up or to other doctors who may face this kind of situation in the future?
don't be afraid, stand up, do it, do what's right for your patients. You have a Hippocratic oath that you took to take care of your patients to the best of your ability. And if you're not willing to do that, then don't even go into the medical field.
And then how has this changed your way that you practice medicine today and the patient-doctor relationship? Has anything changed with that?
No, I've always done it the same way. I try to always do what's right. I'm not perfect. We all make mistakes. I get it, but it's it's just do what's right, do what you believe in, have some, scientific backing for what it is that you're doing. Look, these mRNA shots and lipid nanoparticles killed all the animals, prior to 2020, all the studies that were out there, all the animals died. How we can then turn around and take the same product and inject it into human beings, we're all guinea pigs, or not me, I didn't get a shot, but everybody who's taken a shot is a guinea pig. And the unfortunate thing is that nobody's following the data, nobody's following the science, nobody's reporting on what the risks are. Pfizer was supposed to report by 20, I believe it was supposed to be by February 25. They were supposed to have a 3-year follow-up, and report all of the data that they, were supposed to be compiling. I haven't seen any of that, and it's not going to come out.
Yeah, the emergency use authorization. I don't remember if it was for Moderna or if it was Pfizer, but or maybe for even both, had probably about 6 different research projects that were required by the emergency use authorization. And I recall that the last point of reporting was in 2027. So there was reporting in 2023, and there was probably reporting in 2025, and there's certainly the last one was in 2027. And I don't think that I have seen any of that either. And then probably, as you know, the HHS, which had this system that they had 10 million people in, and
Right,
they were
V-Safe.
collecting, yeah, VSafe, right. And they were collecting all this data, and then they just got rid of it.
Well, I don't know that they get rid of it. They published it. 31% of those patients ended up either not being able to work or couldn't or had to go to an emergency room or urgent care center. Out of the 10 million that they had, over 3 million of them, admitted to the fact that, they had complications. And then they tried to hide that data just like they tried to hide the Pfizer and Moderna data from the, original studies.
So you're right. I misspoke. What I actually meant to say is that they refuse to continue it. So they don't have any long-term data. They
Right.
stopped it. And so they have no idea what's happening to these people, as they go into the future.
Well, and not only that, they only gave people like a checkbox of 5 or 6 things, pain at the site, little
Oh,
redness, maybe a fever, whatever it is. They didn't give them the opportunity. They had a list of, you saw that 8-page list that was in there of all the
yes,
complications that was in
yes.
actually the Pfizer documents that were
Like
submitted.
1,200,
Yeah,
1,200 or
it's like,
something. Yeah.
8-page single space, like, back to back with
Mhm.
a size 4 font. They had a huge list of all these complications, and yet they didn't give anybody the opportunity to check any of those off. And then they fought the government again, or they fought. I think this was done through Del Bigtree and the Informed Consent Action Network, ICANN, with Aaron Siri.
Right.
They fought them in terms of releasing the free data fields where the people could put in their complications, like
Mhm.
what they had, heart attack, stroke,
Right.
death, maybe their family member got on there and put in death because that, there's, if you're self-reporting and you're dead, you're not going to be able to put that into, into the data field. So,
So now you're looking at a bright future, right? Because now you are off the hook for all of this. And what are your plans? And what are your plans? Is it just to go back to the what you were doing? Are you writing a book about it? What do you have anything that you're changing because of everything that happened to you?
well, that it's a secret, Twyla. Can't tell
Is
you.
it?
No, I'm just
Okay.
kidding. No, so I will write a book. In the process right now of just trying to, figure that all out. I've never written a book before. I published a couple of articles on Substack, and then, it's a lot of work, and
Yep.
it's not my forte. My forte is taking care of patients, operating on them, and so yeah. But I will be writing a book. I've had some people contact me about television shows or movies or, whatever. I haven't made a decision about that yet. Um, and but the biggest thing for me right now is I've got to get this. I got to get these mRNA shots at the very least off the market. And my push is, the easiest way to do this, and Robert F. Kennedy doesn't even have to mention COVID, doesn't have to mention vaccines, doesn't have to mention anything about, complications, doesn't have to do anything. If he were to end the state of emergency in the United States right now, the COVID shots that are currently on the market would go away. They would go away overnight because the pharmaceutical companies wouldn't be able to handle the adverse reactions and the liability that they would be exposed to. He's the only.
Have you tried to contact Bondi and see whether or not she would,
Well,
communicate that with him?
I told her that in the meeting that I had with her on
Well,
July, I guess it was 16th. So that Wednesday, July 16th, I told her that. I also told Jim Jordan because I happened to be able to
mm,
have the pleasure of meeting him. And all of these people know of people that have been injured by this vaccine. There's so many people that know that they've been injured, and know of people that are injured. There's people themselves that have been injured.
mhm.
Um, and they're still able to function, but they have vaccine injuries.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's amazing to me that we're still in this situation. RFK knows that he knows of hundreds of people. He called this a bioweapon before he ran for president. Before he actually, even when he was running for president, I believe he was still doing it. Once he joined forces with Donald Trump, he changed his tune a little bit. I truly thought that was just because he didn't want to kind of go against Donald Trump and the Operation Warp Speed and everything else and undermine his message from that. But John Rich has told Donald Trump to his face that this is the reason why you get booed at your rallies. People don't like the mRNA. It's not a good product.
And
Uh,
they did cut, I think, $750 million.
500 million, but there's multi-billions already. It's like chump change.
Yeah, yeah,
And RFK made a promise that nothing was going to be approved without scientific data to back it. And yet two mRNA products have been approved since then without the scientific data to back it. One of them, he quote unquote came back from vacation and said, "Oh, well, these people weren't supposed to do that. They did this on purpose."
yes.
Well, then pull it off.
Hmm.
I mean, you have the full, if that's the case, don't just fire the people, okay, fire them, get rid of them, fine. But why don't you pull that back too? Pull the authorization. You have the full authority to do that. And that hasn't been done.
So that goes to my last question, which is if you could speak directly to lawmakers about medical freedom, not just the vaccines, but medical freedom, what would you tell them? What do we need in this country for doctors to be free?
Well, we need to stop being censored. One, we need to stop being punished for what it is that we do say. I think it was AB 298, 2098 was a California bill
Mhm.
that they passed or they tried. Actually, I think it did get passed and then
They
they
did.
repealed it.
Yeah.
And which basically said that if a physician says anything against what the government narrative is or what the standard talking points are, that he can be, license can be removed and
Right.
livelihood be taken away. I mean, we need to be able to get away with, we need to go back to what our First Amendment says. You're allowed to say anything that you want. I'm a First Amendment absolutist. If you want to get into a movie theater and you want to yell fire and then somebody gets hurt or trampled or dies, then you take the responsibility for that. But you still should still have the right to say that.
Mhm.
And I don't believe in hate speech. I don't believe that there's anything, because everybody's definition of hate is different. So I think we need to get back to, our constitutional rights and, and get back to a position where we're allowed to say what we want. You can't be censored. And if a company, I mean, I guess you can't tell a private company what to do. But if the private company is taking federal funding, then that private company is no longer private, and therefore then they become an arm of the federal government, and so they should be punished for that.
Do I understand it then that you are a cash-based practice,
I am.
not insurance and not government?
No, no insurance.
No insurance, no government. Great.
No.
You could be on our wedge, the Wedge of Health Freedom. That's our online directory of cash-based doctors. I didn't
Okay.
realize that before I started this interview, but
Yeah.
it's at jointhewedge.com for anybody else listening, and I can certainly talk to you about that after we're done. And the last question is there anything else you want to say before we end this interview?
Well, what I've always said and what I and everything else is only you look out for you. And so you need to be able to be strong, stand up for what's right, and realize that there's nobody else out there in this world, whether it be a person, an agency, an organization, or a government that's going to look out for your own best interests. And you need to take some responsibility for your own actions. You need to take responsibility for what it is that you want to achieve in life. Grab life by the horns and don't let anybody else tell you what it is that you need to do, that what's best for your own family and your own well-being.
Well, for people who maybe tuned in like halfway through, or somebody sent you only a clip, this has been a wonderful interview with Dr. Kirk Moore out of Utah, talking about his experience fighting the government when the government came after him for what he was doing to try to save and protect his patients from the COVID shot. So thank you so much, Dr. Moore. I really appreciate your time that you spent with us today.
Well, Twyla, I think I appreciate you having me, and your maiden voyage into the podcast world. Thank you very much. I'm honored.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.